This is the public information meeting number 2 for the Mulberry Street Reconstruction in City of Lake Mills. Overview of my presentation tonight. We're going to start with the project location limits, some of the project funding and scope and costs. Project schedule, project scope, the proposed roadway cross section, impacts on city trees, the proposed detour, and then the historic district within the project corridor. The project location and limits, it's going to start on the south end down on Madison Street here and go northeast just north of Grant Street. You see there's a couple little side chutes here. We'll be doing one block of Fargo, and then this blue chute here is a stormwater conveyance channel down a city-owned right-of-way that no roadway, just a stormwater channel there. For project coordination with State Highway 89, it's probably a popular topic now, is that we're going to phase this project, and this is something pretty new, I guess, is that the southern half of approximately the project will not start until around mid-June. We're still working out the details about what exact date that will be, but it'll be midsummer sometime, that no work will be happening down here. That would be from Madison to, what is it? Just south Franklin, yep, thank you. From Madison to in between Franklin and Fargo. And then the rest of the project to the north, they'll probably start there, and then the work could continue throughout the summer there, depending on where the contractor wants to work at. Again, here's a little bit more of a zoomed in view on the location. I put this up here because I think it's important to note that we're staying pretty close to each intersection. For instance, Oak Street here, the roadway reconstruction is going just past the end of radius for the curb lines. We're keeping everything pretty tight to the project corridor. It won't go down the side streets too much, except for Fargo Street here with, again, that block between Mulberry and Browns Court. And then up here just north of Grant Street, this is where that drainage channel that I mentioned would go, which will extend from Mulberry Street down to pretty much Pope Street. There's an existing drainage ditch for part of that already, but that will be utilized for stormwater drainage for this project. The project funding and costs, the State Transportation Urban, STPU, grant program, the city has a grant for up to $1.18 million. $944,000 of that is a federal grant for physical construction of the project. That's kind of a use it or lose it type money. The city match for this grant amount here is 20% of that amount, which is $236,000. Any remaining construction costs above $944,000 are city responsibility. The original project scope was from Oak to Fargo. The city a number of years ago requested a scope expansion due to pavement condition, stormwater drainage routes, water and sewer condition. That they understood that any money over this amount would be on their dime, but we wanted to make sure that a larger project scope was allowed while still using this grant, and that request was accepted. That brings us to our current project scope of Madison to Grant Street. The preliminary estimated roadway cost is about $2.82 million, and that includes this one block of Fargo Street. That would be for the cost for the roadway, storm sewer, curb and gutter, sidewalk, things kind of associated with the roadway or drainage of the roadway. And then the preliminary sanitary sewer and water main cost is $1.57 million for a total project cost of $4.4 million approximately. The current project schedule, we had the first public information meeting back in 2016. Our 60% design package was approved February 18th of this year. Temporary easement acquisition is ongoing. That's why many of you are here tonight, and the gentlemen in the back of the room are here. That's anticipated to be completed by July. And tonight, public information meeting number 2, April 19th, 2018. After the meeting tonight, we'll be working towards our final design package, which is due for PS&E plan specifications and estimate August 1st this year. The project will be advertised for bidding through WSDOT January 9th of 2019, and then construction is anticipated April through October of 2019. The project scope addresses existing deficiencies on the roadway. As Diane called it once, some people like to call it Lake Mulberry. So we'll be addressing the drainage issues on the roadway. That will help maintain the asphalt, and I guess I'll just run down the list here. We're going to have new asphalt pavement, new curb and gutter, sidewalk, and curb ramps. Many of those curb ramps currently are not ADA compliant. They're pretty steep throughout a lot of the roadway corridor. There's some poor visibility at intersections that kind of make a few of the intersections unsafe. Oak Street and Mulberry is one of the worst ones. Storm sewer, as I mentioned, is either non-existent or undersized. Sanitary sewer is an aging system and also currently has some slope deficiencies versus current design standards. The sewer laterals will be replaced to the right-of-way, which should provide greater reliability for root intrusions, backups, collapses for kind of an older section of the city. Water main will also be replaced the entire length of the project with new ductile iron water main. The water services will also be replaced to the right-of-way, which may, depending on what house, include some lead services, which would be a benefit to the city as well. And then new pavement markings and signage. The project scope also addresses future needs. Storm sewer will be available for extension to the north and west. I have an exhibit here on the right which shows the end of our project here approximately at Grant Street. And we evaluated the drainage of all these areas to the north and the west of that area and kind of set up the storm sewer so that if the city wanted to in the future, there's some of these contributing drainage basins could be picked up by storm sewer and that would aid in prolonging the life of the pavement instead of just long lengths of drainage on the surface of the pavement. Another thing that is being done with the sewer and water design is we're setting up the intersections so that as each one of these side streets gets reconstructed in some future year, it'll be more convenient to just extend the utilities up there and will require the least amount of disturbance to the things that we're building new in 2019. An example here is that the water main will come into Franklin Street and it will take a 90-degree turn and hook into the existing pipe, but then in the future you can hook onto this end and just run it up Franklin Street. So it's setting up for good or smoother transitions and less destruction of the city's investment in this project in the future. The electric lines will also be replaced for the entire length of the corridor. Many of the associated utilities on those lines will also be replaced, such as Frontier and Charter. We've shown here we have new underground electric on the west side. All the electric and the poles will go on the west side from Madison to just south of Fargo, shown by the orange here. And then new overhead electric on the west side again from Fargo to Grant, shown by the blue line. Part of the reason for that is cost, and then also part of the reason is the orange generally goes through the historic district, which I'll talk about later on part of the project corridor. The roadway cross-section, feedback from public information meeting number 1 was very strong in favor of a parking lane. Originally, we did not have a parking lane proposed. The reason for that was to limit costs. Narrower pavement is cheaper, but then also it would aid it in some of the grading and the slopes, preservation of trees and the terrace, things like that, because the roadway could just become narrower. So we widened the cross section to now provide a parking lane. What that means is the proposed roadway is 2 feet wider than the existing roadway, approximately 1 foot on each side. That cross section provides 2 11-foot driving lanes and an 8-foot parking lane. The parking lane will be on the west side of the roadway. This cross section, although wider than originally proposed, it could be wider. 11-foot driving lanes are kind of middle of the road of what a normal driving lane is, kind of in the 10 to 12-foot range. And what that does is it minimizes The terrace minimizes impacts of terrace width for snow storage. Larger terraces are better for snow. You won't see as much thrown up onto the sidewalk if the terrace is wider. It limits impacts to trees, and then it also limits impacts within the historic district. I've got a little bit of a graphic here of the roadway cross section. I'll start, I guess, on what will be the east side of the road. We've got the right-of-way line shown here in red. This is a 66-foot right-of-way. The new sidewalk will be about 1 foot off that right-of-way line. It'll be a 5-foot sidewalk, which is the ADA compliant width for sidewalk. 10.5-foot terrace, a 2.5-foot curb line, 11-foot driving lane, 11-foot driving lane, and then this west side curb lane or parking lane that I mentioned. That parking lane is 8 feet, excuse me, 8 feet wide, but 6 of it will be asphalt, and then the remaining 2 will be the curb pan that you can park on.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So how much wider is the new sidewalk?
About a foot. A lot of the existing is 4 feet, but that width extension will be towards the roadway.
How wide is the sidewalk?
The existing sidewalk is about 4 feet usually. Less than 4?
How wide is the new one?
5.
5.
So 1 foot wider than, yeah. And that's kind of driven by that Americans with Disabilities Act compliant width is 5 feet. And then again, another 10.5-foot terrace, 5-foot sidewalk, and then the 1 foot to the right of way. The impacts on the city trees, 119 trees were identified total within the project corridor. The city forester was consulted about those 119 trees and which ones of those would he consider for removal or like to remove based on species, condition, impacts to overhead electric lines. And he identified 25 trees that he just wanted to take down that in his opinion would be an overall improvement for the city's forestry. The current project design, in addition to those 25 trees identified by the forester, requires removal of 21 trees. The reasons would be terrace grading, some of the sewer and lateral installations, that some of those older laterals go right underneath a tree that was planted on top of them, and you kind of have to connect right where the tree is almost, because the tree was planted, years after the sewer water lateral. Other things would be, I mentioned Oak Street, where the intersection sight distances are unsafe. To improve that situation, we have to lower the terrace, and if there's a tree in the terrace and you're going to cut 3 or 4 feet down there, the tree's not going to survive. So those are 2 common reasons why these 21 additional trees need to come out. So that leaves quite a few of the trees. I guess roughly 2/3 of the trees are staying on the project corridor. And then the trees that are removed are intended to be replaced by the city, as you often see with new roadways. They'll plant a 6 or 8 foot tall tree at species and densities chosen by the city forester. The historic district on the project corridor, this was studied for NEPA, National Environmental Policy Act compliance, and there was discovered that a historic district was along the project corridor. It goes approximately from Oak Street north to a little past Franklin. There was 12 resources identified in the district and 10 were considered contributing. What that means is that 2 of the 12 properties within the district were not considered historic or contributing to the historic nature of that general boundary. The resources within the district were constructed between 1854 and 1921. It was considered a historic district because it illustrates the development of residential architecture in the early part of the city. And then it has a long-standing association with members of the Fargo family, which were again some of the first settlers in the area, which is again another reason to consider a historic area for the city. Our proposed detour during construction is to utilize Madison Street up State Highway 89 or Main Street to County V, Tyronina Park Road, and then back down to Mulberry Street over near the County A bridge. And with that, that's the end of my formal presentation. I'd love to answer any questions. I'd also like to point out that there's a representative, Jim Ottinger from the DOT here today, if anybody has any questions how this project relates to 89, Main Street project. And then also, again, the comment cards over here. You know, if you have any questions that come up later, there's comment cards. My contact info is over there, so please don't hesitate to grab those and you know, send me an email or mail in those comment cards there. So, does anybody have any questions?
Is this going to be a federally funded project?
Part of it is, yes.
Because if it's federally funded,
Oh.
Okay, as Christian Lake Mills leader, I'm asking if it's going to be a federally funded project, because if it is, then it will be subject to Davis-Bacon wages. And if it's subject to Davis-Bacon wages, that increases the cost, which might give you a situation like there is on the Main Street project right now, where the cost to do it is more than what the cost is projected. So, plus, the other half of that question is, are you guys going to be affected by Foxconn and the lack of firms that are willing to bid on this project?
Could you just repeat what your first question was? I'm not quite sure what the question
Whether or not
was.
it's going to be subject to Davis-Bacon wages, because that will drive up the overall cost of the project.
Yes, it will be subject to federal wage rates. And I wouldn't say it will drive up the cost. That those costs of paying federal wage rates are included in the project estimates.
Okay, because those are a lot higher than, like, you know, if you just go to a market rate. But is there a chance that you won't get as many bidders because of the Foxconn project?
Very difficult to say. Bidding is always a very fluid situation, and I really don't want to speculate on that, because that's purely what it would be, is speculation.
Well, I'm just asking because, you know, the Main Street project is kind of being pushed back a little bit because there was only one bid and it came in too high. And I'm assuming that's subject to federal wages as well.
Yeah, I don't know if I guess I can't say entirely sure, but I'm pretty confident that the federal wage rates had nothing to do with why it came in high. It was likely other reasons, you know, bidding climate and things like that in the state that resulted in the bidding situation.
So if there were multiple bidders, there's a possibility that well, obviously, if you have one bidding against the other, somebody can always do cheaper.
Correct. Jim, do you care to weigh in on that at all?
Yeah, the reason I came tonight is just to take the opportunity to talk a little bit about 89 in the event that, you know, we had a setback on the project. Everybody's aware of that. Various reasons, as Brandon alluded to. We don't know what to expect for bidders. On the 89 Main Street, the gentleman up front was correct. We had one bidder on the project, and the price was quite high. It really had nothing to do with the Davis-Bacon Act wages that you're talking about. As we understand from the contractors, there's a lot of work out there. They've got a lot of private work. We had a little bit later what we call let, is the deadline that we want the bids from the contractors to come in. It seemed like most of the bidders were busy with other work. So we ended up with one bidder. The price was quite high. It was much higher than we thought was acceptable. We don't think it's a prudent use of taxpayer money to pay that higher rates, and we decided to reject the bid and try again. So as we talked about, we're going to relet the project in November, so that's when the bids got to come in. We're hoping to see more competition. It's an earlier part for the next construction year of 2019, so we're hoping to see more competition, and with that will come better bids. Likewise, we're also going to talk about coordination of this project with the Mulberry Street project. So what we're hoping is contractors are going to see this as more work in a general area, that maybe mobilization will be a little bit less there might be reasons why the city job comes in a little bit cheaper. If they're bidding on 89 already and they know that another project is in the same city, there's this opportunity that you might say a little bit better prices. So we're trying to coordinate the two. I don't necessarily think it's going to be competition between the two. I think it's probably going to be more the other way that, once again, speculation, I don't know. I'm not a contractor. I work for the DOT, so there is a lot of guessing with this.
Are you going to have to redraw the project? I'm sorry. Are you going to have to redraw the project to try and cut some costs? Because I did this in Lamar, Colorado, and they had to. They're doing this in Lamar, Colorado, which is where I came from a year or so ago, and they're rebuilding that road, their Main Street and downtown. And when the bids came in too high, they came in and figured, okay, how can we cut this project cost down? And they shortened it a little bit, and they did a few little abadabbas where they, put the pen to paper and, cut costs a little bit. Do you guys have to do that?
What we're trying to do here is, so I talked about the thing that we are going to do, which we're going to let the project earlier. So hopefully catch more contractors when they're hungry, looking for the work. So rather than March like we had the last time, we're going to be in November. So we're going to be before the end of the year. So that's one thing that we're hoping is going to increase bidability. We're also looking at other things that we can do with the project. Can we open up another part of the project? So currently what we've had is, and Brandon sort of talked about it, is what we call stage one. And stage one is from Madison Street to Veterans Lane. The downtown portion, that working with the city officials, we really wanted to get that done the earliest. So that said, we originally had it that the contractors couldn't start south of that until they had minimally gravel on that piece. And we're now looking at, can we open up other parts of the project so the contractor can have multiple operations going on at once and being a little less restrictive with our interim, what we call interim completion dates.
What is the window of operation? I mean, like where I come from, it was like, from like April till like November 1, and after that, the ground was too frozen, so.
It is early when the frost comes up, we want to start. And I don't want to commandeer the whole meeting. This is really about Mulberry Street. And, if you got some questions, you and I can maybe talk a little bit more. But I'm here to answer questions. If you've got questions about Main Street, I just want to help Brandon out a little bit here.
Yeah, we'll bring it back to some Mulberry Street questions here.
Brandon, can you talk about two things? One, what's the transition between the above-ground electrical? I can't picture what that looks like when it goes below ground at the historic district. And then the second question is, does the speed limit on Mulberry stay the same as you widen the roadbed?
So the first question about electric utilities, I'm the roadway engineer. So I guess I'll answer them at the best of my knowledge is that it would come down a pole through some sort of plastic conduit attached to the pole and just kind of go underground. So it would be a fairly vertical transition. You might see a guy wire off the end of that last pole, but other than that, I guess I'm not positive. Does that answer the question good enough, or?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
And what about the speed limit?
Oh, and the speed limit. Yeah, the speed limit is staying the same. Again, the roadway is only getting 2 feet wider, so in terms of how it feels, it's not going to feel giant. I mean, you're still going to have parking lanes. Oftentimes, speed limits increase with much bigger with change there.
Is the cost really prohibitive on putting underground all the way out to Grant Street?
Again, not being the electrical engineer, but I believe that the cost approximately doubled to take it underground the entire way versus half overhead and half underground.
Yeah, but they're going to move all the poles and wires anyhow, aren't they, from the east side to the west side of the street? they have to move the whole
Yeah.
thing anyhow.
Again, just to my knowledge, underground is much more expensive than overhead. And I believe I may have heard something in the realm of a couple $100,000 more expensive to do it the whole way. But I'm not positive on that. I'm not,
But the poles are going to be moved from one side of the street to the other, so.
correct.
Right?
Yep.
So they have to move the whole works anyhow.
Yes, that's accurate. I think that it's a linear foot cost, that it's much cheaper to go above ground than underground. And so if you're just doubling the amount of linear feet underground, the costs just go way up. So whether they're moving the poles or not, it's just way more expensive to go underground the whole way.
The cost of going underground is slightly more expensive. The real cost is when we go underground, we're responsible for replacing all the way to the house and resetting the pole. Because as you come in now, you're overhead. And so you have one that comes in over the top and then is set up for that. So everything that would have to change for underground on the private side, we have to pick up if we go underground. And that kicks the cost more than double. So for the Historic Preservation District, it was easier for us to do it that way and reduce the impacts to help with getting the grant to move through. But we tried to keep the cost as under control as possible. This project is $651,000 for electric as it is, and it would have run up over $900,000 easily if we had gone the other direction. And with South Main Street project, we've already invested well over $1.4 million in that one with electric too. So it was looking at trying to control our long-term costs and our rates. We're already having other issues.
Diane had a question.
Is there, oops, I lost my bouncer. Is there a map here tonight that shows the trees that will be affected on the Mulberry project?
Yes, definitely, and thank you for bringing that up. That instead of going into every single tree that's going to be removed, if you'd like to discuss it, there certainly is a map. We have a plan sheet which shows all the trees that are.
Can you point to it? Where is it right now?
Oh,
The map.
It's on a table in the back over
Okay.
there. Yeah,
Well-
sorry.
I want to know where it is.
Yeah, I guess if you're interested in discussing your specific tree,
Well,
please.
I think a lot of people here are
Exactly, yeah,
interested
you
in
meaning
your
anybody in
trees.
the room here, please come see me afterwards and we can go take a look at what's exactly happening.
So it's back there somewhere?
Yep, it's back on the table back there.
Okay.
In regards to the trees, you said the city would determine or replace those trees and determine what kind. Do the homeowners have input on what they want in their yard?
I think that there's an approved list, but yes, within that list, you can make choices. Is that accurate? Yeah. And I think it's a fairly, somewhat extensive list of species too.
So if it's a 20-year-old tree coming out, what is it replaced with?
Well, generally, I've seen them in the 6-foot range, or 6 to 8 foot range. They're not 20 feet tall either.
So the allocation given is not necessarily for the homeowner to replace their own trees. It's just compensation to say, this is what's going to happen. Is that right?
You're saying for like the easements compensation? or
Yes.
what? Oh, okay. No, that's not associated with the trees.
Okay.
Well, it could be. It could be. Not this. We're talking about city trees though, the ones in the terrace.
Oh, okay.
So
The
all
other
the,
ones
all
are-
the, yes, so if you had a tree in your private property
Yes.
that was being taken out because of construction, I believe there would be some compensation through the easement process.
Okay. Right.
Yep,
Okay,
yep,
that's
so-
my
yep,
question.
yep,
Okay,
so
thank you.
Yeah, so if it's a private tree.
Yes.
You would receive compensation that you could then use
And
to
then you
replace
just-
it however you'd like.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
else want to ask? We've got lots
So the sidewalks are being widened by 1 foot, so make it 5 feet. Is the distance changing from how far the sidewalk is from the curb
Yes.
going towards property owner's side?
The distance from the front of the sidewalk to the back of the curb is becoming more narrow.
Okay, so it's going closer to the
By
street.
about 2 feet, I guess. The roadway comes out 1 foot and the sidewalk comes in 1 foot.
Okay, and I did discuss a little bit at my meeting earlier, there's one part of our sidewalk that goes very close to the curb as it is, and the snow plows are always kicking the snow onto the sidewalk, so if we get too close, that's gonna be a problem long-term, not just in one little spot.
Yeah.
So we have to be conscious of not getting, in those areas where it's already close to the curb, closer than what your terrace shows.
I believe you're probably talking about up at Grant Street.
Yeah,
Yeah, that sidewalk is getting bumped out to the same distance from the curb as the rest of the
The rest of it?
project. Yeah, they'll just be kind of filled in, bumped out, and then they'll be graded behind the sidewalk. There's that kind of low area over there.
Okay, I have that property on Grant Street that you're talking about.
Okay.
O'Neill Street comes straight in, and I noticed tonight they showed me that there's going to be 2 extra crosswalks put in, which impacts my property.
You
Why do
probably,
they have to put 2 in?
he's here for the Main Street, I'll talk
Okay.
about. I'm trying to go to your property, so where are you here?
On the corner of Grant and Mulberry.
This one?
The very,
Here's Grant.
yeah,
Mulberry.
that's right, the corner
Yep.
one, right there, where O'Neill Street comes
Okay.
in.
So I guess I'd probably love to talk to you about this, because I don't have anything zoomed in on that intersection. Well, maybe I do. So we're putting in a crosswalk across Grant Street, and then
Right.
another couple across Mulberry Street, yes. And that's a pretty standard city thing, that you would have crosswalks at a 4-way intersection. You would have
But that-
crosswalks each way,
But that's way down.
way down.
Yeah, you're talking O'Neill Street is probably 40 feet or more down from Grant Street, and they're putting 2 crosswalks in there. So now I have 3 crosswalks that I have to clean?
I think your property would only have,
No, sir.
right there, this property?
That was what he told me tonight, sir.
Oh, well, I think we should probably talk afterwards.
Okay.
Make sure I'm getting the facts right here.
Raise your hand if you want to talk, so we know where to put them.
Got one behind you
Quick
there.
question. I don't quite understand the flags that are out there right now. Some have pink on them, some have blue on them. Some of them you'll see go into the property quite a distance. And I happen to have a fence about less than 2 feet off the sidewalk. My question is that fence going to get tore down, and then I'm responsible to put it up myself if I want it?
Most likely not. Have you met with the?
No, I haven't.
No, okay. That's kind of what they're here to talk about, is when we ask for an easement, if we are for your property.
Okay.
They'll discuss all those details with you. And if you have concerns about a fence specifically, they'll either tell you if they know, or ask me or somebody from Strand, what's happening on your property. And then if there's specific instructions that you have, or things you want to be, sometimes things that come up are like flower beds. I'd
Sure.
like to be told so I can pull them out ahead of time. Any kind of special things, they can write what's it called, instructions to the construction engineer document that kind of outlines, property owner specific concerns and things to be addressed during construction. I would generally say that if there's a fence there, it probably is not coming out. I mean, we typically try to avoid touching those type of private improvements. Can't say for sure without looking at the plans exactly by your house, but they would definitely be able to talk through all that with you, or
Right.
myself afterwards.
Did you have something, Monty?
Hi. We did meet with him, and I don't know if it's true for the whole length, but the part of the block that we're in between Fargo and Grand Street, they did say that the sidewalk, the extra foot, is going to go between the current location and the road. So they'll be adding a foot toward the road, which will make the tree lawn smaller. Not any encroachment on our lawn.
Correct.
It'll go toward the tree lawn.
Correct.
Now, I'm sure some of you don't like that idea, but that's kind of where that's what we were told. So, and who else would like to have the mic? Okay. Oh, you're fine. Okay, anybody else? Anybody have a question that they didn't get answered?
I'm going to pick up on that point. If you're widening the roadbed 1 foot on each side, and you're also widening the sidewalk towards the roadbed, the city terrace in a lot of places is going to be a lot steeper, is it not?
Not necessarily.
No?
That's, either the roadway will come up,
Okay.
or the sidewalk will sink down. That's why sometimes, you might have a 5-foot easement, but somebody else 3 houses down might have a 10-foot easement because we need to drop the sidewalk and then grade back into their yard farther to try and keep those terraces, generally trying to improve if there's a steep one, you generally try and improve it. That's kind of the goal in general. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't answer your question, yeah. The pink flags, I believe, are the edge of the easements that they're proposing to acquire, and again, they would discuss this with you. I think the blue flags are slope intercept. Yeah. That would be,
They told us that the blue flag was the easement that they were requesting, that they could like grade our yard that up to where that blue flag is, that if they, they're putting in new sidewalks, so there might be a new incline there, and the blue flag is how far into your yard they can go and actually like rip up your lawn and grade it, and then they would reseed the lawn after. But that's what the blue flags are. Different distances from, oh. I think it's the further in is how far they can go to grade. Yeah, and you might have a problem with that. But have you talked to them yet? Okay,
Yeah.
that would be a good question to ask them. I don't know if they know they have 2 there.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a mistake. Could it be a mistake?
well, sometimes on an individual property, the easement boundary isn't consistent. It isn't a consistent line. It might go jut out in a rectangle. It might go diagonal across maybe a corner of your lot. So if you have multiple flags, you shouldn't necessarily expect to see them in a straight line on your property.
Go pretty straight down the street.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot, correct. Yep, I would say most of the street probably is a pretty straight line, but specifically at intersections, sometimes at driveways, near driveways, the easement might jut back away from the road some. But those gentlemen, when you meet with them, will go through, the flags you're seeing are here, here, and here on your property, and they'll show you and what they mean. And so if you haven't talked to them yet, they're here. I think they've got appointments for most of the night.
And Saturday.
And yes, Saturday.
What is the time on Saturday that they're here?
I am actually not positive.
Okay, we'll find that out.
Yeah,
9 to 3 on Saturday.
9 to 3. Okay, there you go.
But you still would be best to make an appointment rather than just walk in. Yes, good for you.
Yep.
You want the mic? Here it comes.
Well, what happens to the sidewalk from my house, the front of my house, out to the tree lawn, out to the sidewalk, if they change the elevation of the sidewalk?
They would replace it as, like you're saying, from your front
Yeah,
front
my
door
front.
to the sidewalk or something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, that would be replaced,
Oh, okay,
like with whatever material it is generally.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Same with driveways.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so Diane's pointing out that behind the sidewalk, any driveways that are damaged or torn out will also be replaced in kind, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Anybody else have a question or a comment or something?
All right. Well, thanks everybody for coming. This is a pretty good turnout. Again, if you have anything else or want to talk about anything specifically at your property, like the trees that we discussed, things like that, maybe the easements, please come see me. I'll be around for a while after the meeting here. Thanks, everybody.